What's up, Bonk? Cliff the Vinyl Cheapskate here, coming at you with a video. Gonna do a response to the Metal Theologian. Maybe like a month and a half ago, I watched a video that Aaron put up that was a video talking about his Canon. So like basically what he was talking about, well, from what I got from it was like these are like the cornerstones of his musical taste. So I'm gonna try and do a response to that. This is kind of like I think I've done this before, but kind of like the musical journey almost. Basically like showing records that are kind of like were kind of like an awakening, like an awakening, and really shaped my musical taste, if you will. And there's a lot. There's a lot of records over here. I'm probably not going to show... I'm going to show a bunch of them. I don't know if I'm going to show all of them. But really just records that meant something and kind of like perked my interest in music were a lot of these records. When I was a kid, music all the time. My dad was a bass player, so there's always music around, usually just like classic rock stuff, like the normal stuff, Led Zeppelin, Jimi Hendrix, all that kind of stuff, and I still love all that stuff, but there was certain sounds that really stuck out to me and really kind of informed where I would go musically, taste-wise later. And one of the first bands that I can think of, there's two actually. The first two bands I could think of were the Talking Heads. When I was a kid, I loved the song, the Up All Night song. I loved that song. Would make my dad turn it up on the car every time, and my love of the Talking Heads has only grown. I love this band, like I said, since I was like 3 years old. I've loved this band. Something about the energy that they put out, and they were different than a lot of the music my dad was listening to at the time, or my family had going on all the time. So it was just an interesting thing to me. I picked this record in particular because it's my favorite one. But yeah, this band really hit me when I was little. Another one that hit me real hard when I was really little, Guns N' Roses. And if you know, and I was thinking Appetite for Destruction, which I do have a copy of that, but I couldn't find the CD, so I'm just showing this one. But Appetite for Destruction, all their hits, Guns N' Roses hit me hard. I was little too. I was probably like a little older than that, maybe like 5 or 6. And I remember being in my room just like singing along with that CD. And if this isn't telling, it's a weird punk band, and essentially like a grimy, heavy, at least on Appetite for Destruction, kind of grimy heavy metal band. I know they were huge, but when you're little, that's what you get into. You get into whatever plays on the radio for the most part. Maybe not now, but back in the 90s, 80s, when I was little in the 80s, that's what you did. But move along. As I got older, I got more into music, and a friend of mine gave me a split tape of Minor Threat and the Misfits, and that was an awakening for me. I had been into like sort of like the more poppy mainstream stuff that I heard. Like I liked Rancid, and I was probably in middle school, but I had liked Nirvana, and Nirvana was a big one for me. and then I looked into some of the stuff that Nirvana was into as I got older, and really got into like, you know, the Melvins, stuff like that. But and I started going into like more pop punk stuff. Like I really liked like No Effects and Lagwagon and all those bands. No Use for a Name. I had started getting into all that stuff, and I liked it. I was a skateboard kid. I liked the skateboard, and all that stuff was great for skateboarding. But once I heard Minor Threat, particularly, and the Misfits as well, I loved the Misfits too. For a long time, I've just heard the Misfits so many times, but Minor Threat really stuck out. I never got into the straight edge thing, but just how tight and fast and like perfectly put together these songs were, really, and there was like an anger and an edge to it that really spoke to me more so than, you know, kind of like the goofy, silly pop punk stuff like No Effects and Lagwagon, that kind of stuff. This really stuck out to me and really made me think like, wow, there really is like a whole nother world of music out there that I didn't really know about. And close to that time, there was actually a small scene in my town. I forgot to grab that record. And the drummer to that had introduced me to bands from Philly because they played a lot of shows in Philly. So bands like these Disc Sucks records. These Disc Sucks records were instrumental, and really the whole Philly scene, but especially these Disc Sucks records were instrumental in our in mine and my friends coming up. There was just an anger to these, and like the angst and anger was so palpable in these albums that they stuck with me through all of my musical taste. Most of my musical taste is pretty angry music. I'm not as angry as I was when I was a teenager, but these records definitely shaped the style of music that I love today. Just hard. There's a good bit of metal in here. I actually befriended the drummer to this band for a while. He was a good friend of mine when I lived in Philly. We worked together at the same health food store. But very good stuff. Disc Sucks plays kind of like a fast, crusty, there's almost some thrash elements in there. Just very good stuff. Super fast punk rock. Super angry. I mean, songs like You're Fucked, Things I See, It's Shit, just really like played into some of the depression you feel as like an isolated young kid in a basically an oil refinery town where nobody leaves. They all just stay there, afraid of the city. It's very similar to like things that are going on today. But that really got me into things like this, which is what we're listening to now. This Philly Shreds comp. Definitely a key instrumental in my taste in music. Bands like Violent Society, Rizzo Machine, The Boyles, Ink and Dagger, Flag of Democracy, Dead Alive, I Hate You, all bands that like when I was like developing my music taste, those were instrumental. But this comp collects some of the best Philly music from the 90s. And really like the Philly scene shaped basically the Philly scene back in the 90s and early 2000s really shaped a lot of the person that I am and what I enjoy, for sure. So like I said, bands like Violent Society or The Boyles, this is a great just this record in particular is just like a complete corner of my would be a complete corner of my musical taste, especially early on. This is the punk portion. I have a punk portion and a hardcore and a metal portion, punk and hardcore portion and a metal portion. Maybe 2 different videos. I'm not sure. I'm already in the 10-minute mark. Moving from those early Philly Shreds things, 2 more that really moved me in a direction. I got a tape copy of this, Black Flag's Damaged. Another one that just is kind of distinct. The feel of Black Flag, that dark, kind of brooding, let's face it, the Henry Rollins era especially. Plus, they have songs like Rise Above and Six Pack and What I See, Police Story, Gimme Gimme Gimme. You know, all these like great catchy songs that really get to you when you're a skateboarding punk rock kid. But then you've got Depression, Room 13. You know, it's just great stuff. Perfect skateboard music. Like I said, No More. Like, you've got like the hits on side A, and then side B is like, they're kind of like dirgy, more depressive stuff. Perfect record right here. I've always loved this record, and I've been a big Black Flag fan since I was a kid. And as a lot of us are, but this was definitely instrumental in shaping my music taste. Still, to this day, even my favorite album this year, I hear bits and pieces of like that, like dirgy, in that Science Man record that I keep telling people to listen to. I don't think I've shown it on here yet. It'll be on a Vinyl Finds video, but even stuff like that still has that like dirgy, kind of like off-kilter Black Flag riffing that if something has that in it, I'm almost instantly a fan. But yeah, Black Flag Damaged, huge in my musical taste development. I should have pulled the CD, but I picked up a CD called 100% Hardcore Punk, put out by was it Captain Roy Records, I think. But I picked that record up, or that CD up, just because I was getting into punk, and it said 100% Hardcore Punk, and I recognized like 3 bands on it. I recognized Conflict. I don't remember, but I recognized a few bands on it, and I was like, oh, this looks like a good comp, and I picked it up. It was all the classic, like, UK82 stuff. It was One Way System, it was Faroukers, it was Mau Mau's, it was, I think there was some Broken Bones on there, it was The Blood, it had all those on there. But that really got me into looking into more contemporary, like, or more like older 80s UK stuff, and I really landed hard on Conflict. Conflict, just their politics, their overall vibe really got to me, and really put me onto a big section of like where my belief systems would stem from and what to work towards. Very much put me onto a kick of being vegetarian for a long time. Not vegetarian anymore, but I was for a long time. But Conflict really introduced me to a way of thinking and questioning, and along with bands like Crass and stuff. But Conflict really spoke to me because they still had that. Because a lot of those like anarcho bands, they were a little over my head when I was young, and I gradually grew to love that stuff too. But this was more straightforward, more aligned with a lot of the stuff I was getting into as like a young guy. But this really, really did it. And I remember listening to that hardcore punk album with my friends a million times because every song on there was a banger. And still to this day, some of my favorite bands I found on that comp. But Conflict was one that really, really stuck out when I was young and really had a really big impact. And still to this day, I listen to these a few times a year. I'll just pop on some Conflict just to get it out of my system. Also, another end of the spectrum is my Oi stuff, and this is a complete banger. I play this once a week. Cockspar, Shock Troops. This is an album I can sing every word to. And also still, to this day, looking for bands that remind me of this. Blitz is another one that is one of my favorites. I can sing half their songs, all their lyrics, everything. But Cockspar, for sure. Alright. The wife is working from home. She just yelled downstairs. Moving from Conflict, I got a little harder and heavier. And this is kind of where... This isn't exactly where my metal influence came from. But this is where some of like my interest in more extreme metal started. More extreme music started. But from Conflict, I kind of like started seeing patches at shows. I was going to more shows at that time. More of like a punk kid who was going. I was sneaking to Philly, going to shows, going to see bands, a lot more. And I was seeing, patches on the Crustier Kids, and I was like, "What is that?" And I stumbled upon His Hero's Gone, and this is an album that blew my mind. I did not know that music could sound like this when I heard this. So that made me like rabidly start looking into other stuff and really stretch into like way more. I already had known that there was like an underground scene because I had been to going to shows and I knew a lot of the Philly bands. And I had started becoming friends with some of the guys in those bands at this point. And when I found this, it just like really opened my mind to another thing. And I went into a deep, I kind of grew out of this, but I went into a deep like grindcore phase where I was just like, what's the most insane stuff I can hear? And that was kind of like, it was kind of funny to me how like insane those grindcore bands got. Because I would listen to stuff like Evil Cunt and what are some other early ones? I don't even remember off the top of my head, but I would get into I started getting into Unholy Grave and all that stuff. But His Hero's Gone was musically writing very good songs. They were very proficient at their instruments, employing a lot of the techniques of like punk and hardcore and metal that I had liked, because I had gotten into metal a little bit at this point, but I was like not that deep, and this really pushed me over the edge to find better stuff. But His Hero's Gone was like instrumental in my development of my music taste. Still to this day, if something sounds close to this, I pick it up. But yeah, His Hero's Gone, definitely up there. And from His Hero's Gone, they broke up pretty early on in my adult life when I was going to shows, and I never got to see them live, which was a bummer. But I did get to see Tragedy live a lot. And Tragedy, at first, they hit me, and I was like, man, this is good, but it's not as good as His Hero's Gone. Still to this day, I don't think it's as good as His Hero's Gone stuff. But they've grown on me, become one of my favorite bands. probably one of the biggest reasons I started looking into more uh, like uh, more international hardcore stuff was because of Tragedy. Tragedy had been very into like Japanese hardcore, so I started picking up bands just because I heard they were from a different country, and I'm like, well, this stuff, and that really landed me on Swedish hardcore and Japanese hardcore, two of my favorite things to listen to still to this day. A good Japanese hardcore band uh, will get me every time. If something's from Japan, I usually just pick it up. Then I decide if I'm going to keep it or not. Most of the time, I do keep it. Uh, Also got me more into Swedish stuff, and actually getting into that kind of stuff probably got me more into metal. But I think I'll do the metal video next. It's been about 20 minutes. Um, so, but yeah, Tragedy definitely one of the cornerstones of my musical tastes, for sure. And some stuff that came around later on in punk and hardcore. Like I said, really introduced, like, Tragedy introduced me to this kind of stuff, like Totalitar and Disclose. Uh, Really, that this kind of stuff was instrumental in me getting more into. And I had gotten this record early on in my adult life. I found this. I worked at a bookstore that consigned records and sold new and used records, and they would get all this punk stuff in, and I'd eat it up. If it looked like this, I just bought it to check it out. And records were way cheaper back then too. And then there's the more not slightly off the path stuff like Poison Idea. Poison Idea today is one of my favorite bands of all time. Just the nihilism and aggression. But again, also shaping my music taste still to this day. Poison Idea, if it's something that even incorporates some of this, like you hear a lot of Poison Idea in like modern bands like Public Acid, or obvious one is Long Knife. They are like a Poison Idea worship band. But it doesn't necessarily have to be a worship band. Just have some of this in there. Like even bands like Rat Cage, I think, have some Poison Idea influence, and they're a British band. So great stuff all around. But yeah, first one down. I'll do another one of these probably later this week because I have all the records pulled. But that was the cornerstones of my punk rock tastes. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. Cheers. I'd like to see some of these videos done by somebody else. Like, what's your canon? What's the stuff that you listen to that kind of like really shapes the musical, the overall musical vision of who you're, or not who you are, but yeah, even who you are, or where your musical taste comes from. Love to see videos like that by more people. It's fun seeing what everybody picks up in their Vinyl Finds videos and stuff, but sometimes, maybe you need to stretch a little further than that sometimes. But anyway, thanks for watching, guys. Hope you enjoyed the video. Cheers.